Thanks, first of all, for the invite to come and speak today. Just a mix of people here from companies all over the world is really compelling, and it makes a change often to go to conferences where there's just a lot of talk about what's happening and what's now. And as Kaya touched on, climate change is here today, and certainly over the last couple of months being in the UK. UK is already quite a rainy country, but now people come to me saying, "Oh, it's getting wetter and wetter." And I was like, well, unfortunately. Climate change doesn't mean just getting hotter. It also means, certainly for the UK, more rain and horrible springs and probably even wetter summers as well. And for me, within BT Group, we're a leading telco, supporting businesses across the globe for fixed and mobile connectivity, data centers, cloud solutions, and security. And within my role, I'm kind of focused on circularity and net zero, and working on how we can deliver our goals of being a net zero business by March 2041. And really for me, I wanted to kind of start off just to get an understanding of actually, people often think about telecoms and connectivity, how important is it? And I just want to see a quick raise of hands of, how many people have a smartphone? Everyone. And how many people used the internet today? And how many people easily, and I don't want any fibbers, could easily do their job today without access to the internet? There's one hand back there I'll speak to you after. But as you can see, the importance of connectivity in our world today is vital for how we work, play, connect with people across the globe. And the technology and the solutions that we see today, for my children, it will look like the Stone Age by the time they get to our age, and just how quickly it can grow. And that growth of technology and solutions that we're seeing at the moment, the ICT sector globally accounts for around 2 to 3% of emissions, which is pretty much on par, if not a little bit greater than aviation, which often some people find quite surprising. Whereas, aviation is always the kind of the bad boy of emissions, but the sector that we're in, it's certainly a big contributor to that, and it's potentially using about 4% of global electricity. And as we see the growth of digitalization and AI and large language models, it's projected to grow to about 20% of global energy use by 2030. And as you heard at the talk at the start, that energy would be quite useful and handy for direct air capture solutions. So if the ICT sector is suddenly consuming all of that, that won't be able to grow. And similarly, things like AI and large language model, the power consumption with that is expected to grow 70% year on year to 2027. So it's really, really big impacts potentially there. But on the flip side is actually the benefits that can come with those solutions. As I talked about, the digitalization that we've got, how we can connect to people, it really highlighted during the COVID pandemic how we were able to continue to work. The world didn't suddenly come to a stop. And it's a report through Jesse and Accenture a few years ago highlighted that the ICT sector could play a role by 2030 to help reduce global emissions by 20%. So it has got that role there through abatement solutions, through able ways to reduce that impact. And I think that's the really key thing to take away is actually it's not always bad. And Microsoft were recently quite open about their recent sustainability report that they've seen a growth of 30% in their emissions, largely linked to the scale up of data centers and AI. But I think that's then going to help hone their focus to work with their value chain to how can we build data centers in the future to reduce that impact and unlock those capabilities that essentially ICT and AI can support. But also, you're seeing countries like Germany and Singapore put pressure on the growth of data centers linked to kind of energy resource scarcity in those countries and kind of limit some of that scale there. But I think for me, it's actually how we can work together and find solutions to do it. And this is where we've been working with a lot of our companies and customers, both in the UK and abroad, to really support them on that journey and build that kind of platform for good. So the first thing that we kind of start off with is, measure. And there's the old adage of, what you can't measure, you can't address. And so working with our supply chain when we're delivering network solutions or infrastructure, increasingly we're then going out and finding, what is the impact of the hardware, what is the end-to-end, carbon and energy use of our networking solutions. So then we can then, set a baseline for those customers to say, over a year, based on the solutions we're providing you, we can quantify it and help them understand this is the impact. And that's really good for the customers because they know what to tackle, but it also then helps us to understand what we can address. And it's moving away then from a kind of average unknown approach to actually quantifiable numbers that we can then support those customers with. So once we've measured and set that baseline, a lot of clients that we're seeing, they might have targets where over the length of a contract we might have with them, they might want to reduce that by half over 5 years. They might even want it to be kind of carbon neutral or net zero, however they term it. So then we move on to how can we optimize it for them? So working with them to identify key areas. Is it the hardware that they might be using? Is there ways that they can introduce refurb equipment that might come with a lower impact? Can they sweat the asset, so to speak, to use it for longer and not, say, stick to normal replacement cycles of every three years with technology? Then it's also looking at the network as well. So, often organizations might think they need, a whole suite of solutions. And actually, can we see through dashboards and products that we've got, such as our digital carbon dashboard and also our network platform, to identify, actually, you've got a capacity of X, but actually you're only using 50% of it. So can we dial that back? Because often within network solutions, the base load you might build is still churning and using power. So actually, can we dial that back down? And one such solution the brilliant team within our kind of network operation have worked on is a solution we've launched called Global Fabric. So that's allowing companies to connect multiple cloud solutions up to enable them to work more efficiently. And compared to our existing kind of global network, it's about 79% less energy intensive than that previous model. So we're seeing now companies and working with them to find those solutions to then reduce those emissions there. And then once we've done all that optimization, so they've got their baseline, they've measured it, they know what they've reduced, and we've pulled the levers that we can within our control to reduce the impacts across that network solution, you're then left within the unabatable emissions at the end. And we're seeing increasingly through RFPs and tenders, both public and private sector in the UK and further afield, organizations wanting to, over, say, the term of the contract, have a carbon neutral, net zero, and as Kai touched on, there's loads of terminologies there. So we're working with them to understand what they're looking for, and then finding those solutions that can then remove those emissions. And particularly in the hardware space, once we've installed a network and a solution, those embodied emissions, can't be reduced any further. So if they're looking for that solution, be it net zero or carbon neutral, will require CDR to get there. So something now we're exploring with Climeworks is, once we've kind of done that footprinting and baselining for those organizations that really want a high quality, high integrity solution, is working with Climeworks to then quantify, actually, this is what we need to then deliver that solution over the contract. So then we can go to the customer and say, yes, within 5 and to 9, however long the contract is, it will be carbon neutral and deliver that. And we're as I said, we're increasingly seeing that demand. But also we want to make sure that as a very risk-averse organization, that the partners we're working with are high quality. So obviously it's really refreshing to see Climeworks have the Puro standard to really rubber stamp the credibility of that removal. And also, particularly in the UK, there's, over the last kind of 2 years, a lot of challenges around kind of greenwashing claims of carbon neutral solutions, a lot of focus on, carbon removals and carbon avoidance credits that have been kind of put through the wash and come out as being quite a challenge. So we want to make sure, as a large, well-known organization, that the partners we're working with to deliver those solutions that the organizations have are up to scratch and going to deliver what they're after. So working through all those stages then, that's how we see, that transition to a low-carbon digital economy, and hopefully then address some of those growth that we're seeing in the sector, which, from my perspective, I think is for the good. As with all technology moves, it starts slow and then you'll have this hockey stick effect. So whilst we might see blips in increased emissions, as documented by kind of Microsoft and other organizations, as we grow in this space, fundamentally, over the long term, it will deliver what we need. And certainly for a business like BT, we're not immune to climate change. Increased heat, increased water from rainfall doesn't mix well with electronics and exchanges that we operate. And I don't think there's a rice bowl big enough to put one of our exchanges in to dry out. So we want to make sure that we're working in this sector, but with partners like Climeworks and other like-minded organizations to really deliver on that scaling up of the technology, because fundamentally, climate change is here right now, and we want to then support in this area to deliver it. So for us, building that platform for good is our way to kind of contribute, and working with other telcos and organizations here today to then measure that and deliver it. And for me, the reason why I really enjoy, exploring these conversations is fundamentally, as my children grow up, I want to kind of know that we played a role. And as I said at the start, it's good to see companies come together like this today to then actually do something about this, and then hopefully this is the start of a really an amalgamation of organizations making a change and really scaling up fundamentally what we need. And as been well documented, CDR can't wait, so we need to scale it up. Finalizing and finishing on kind of our approach on carbon removal. So I'm currently at the start of that journey of what it looks like for BT as a whole. So as I said at the start, we've got a net zero target by 2041. People often think that's quite far away, but it's rapidly approaching, and in the blink of an eye, we'll be in the mid-2030s there. So understanding and what we need to do as a business to start scaling that up and building that business case within the organization is really key. And for those who were here yesterday in some of the kind of workshops, I think that's the really big thing, is actually making decisions today, which you yourself might not see through to the end. I probably won't be with BT in 2041, but you need to start that conversation now and kind of make that bold step to then have a solution in place that another part of the business or someone else who will come into business will see out. So we can't wait for that. So hopefully that's given a snapshot of something we're doing within the telco sector and how we're supporting our customers and partnering with an organization like Climeworks to reduce the impact and allow that scaling of positive digital technology with a reduced impact over time. Thank you.